Mr. Speaker, a few weeks ago, we heard on this floor from the governor when he gave the State of the Commonwealth address. He set a tone to encourage us all to work together for the people of Kentucky. And I could not agree more with that challenge. I'm glad he laid that down. Now is the time for us all to come together and do the work of the people of this Commonwealth. Another thing that the governor mentioned that really stood out to me was a line from a comic book. "With great power comes great responsibility," he quoted. And I'll admit, I'm not that big of a comic book fan. I don't know a lot about it. I know there's a lot of movies made about comic books now. But I grew up not reading comic books, but reading baseball stats and chasing and following my beloved St. Louis Cardinals. But now's the time for us not to deal with comic books and fantasy, but rather reality. And this legislature, the people's branch of government, our most important constitutional duty is to create a spending plan for the next 2 years with the money that the taxpayers send to Frankfurt. That is our reality. Mr. Speaker, we have to look beyond campaign promises. This state has many needs, and the resources are not plentiful. But we have a job to do, and we have a great power, the power of the purse. 2 years ago, as we did 2 years before, and 2 years before, and 2 years before, we came together and passed a 2-year spending plan. And I think a lot of the steps that we took 2 years ago can be built upon. Because of the budget that we passed 2 years ago, for the first time in the decades, our rainy day fund has a decent size of money in it. We talked about it yesterday here on the House floor. And it's projected at the end of this biennium to have over $300 million in the rainy day fund. The budget that we passed 2 years ago had a low capacity of debt. Our debt ratio was below 6% at 5.62%, well below the 6% that is generally perceived as ideal's number for state government. Another reality, Mr. Speaker, something we don't hear a lot about, it doesn't get a lot of press, but we lowered the structural imbalance to $85 million in the last budget. That means non-recurring revenues, the structural imbalance of non-recurring revenues to pay for recurring expenses has been significantly reduced from previous budgets. That isn't glamorous. It doesn't get a lot of press, but it's a reality that we must stay true to. Another reality, and we talked about it here today on this floor, is the pension crisis. If there was a great comic book hero that could swoop in and fix this, we would all welcome it. But we have to set the policy. That is our job. And since 2015, Mr. Speaker, every budget has fully funded KERS non-hazardous. And the ARC has continued to increase. The current budget we're in is 83.43% of payroll. The boards have set the ARC for the budget that we're getting ready to craft at 93%. 93 cents of every dollar we spend or 93, every dollar we spend on payroll, we have to put another 93 cents in pension contributions just to fully fund the ARC. That is a big, big number. Mr. Speaker, my friend, the gentleman from Taylor, who's doing much better and improving every day, and I thank God for that. He and I had many discussions about education funding. You guys know how passionate he is about education. He was proud of the fact, and he is proud of the fact, that last budget we fully funded the teacher retirement system, and we funded SEEK levels per pupil at $4,000. If we include the retirement contributions in education funding, as most states do, that's over $7,000 per pupil. That's a record amount. It's not ever been seen in a budget that I can remember, and it is a great responsibility that we have to continue that. Now, I understand our friends in the press got briefed from the governor on his budget proposal. I look forward to seeing that proposal tonight with you for the first time. I think it's an important first step in the process. The governor lays out his recommendation. But make no mistake about it, we, the General Assembly, will be the final steps in this process. I look forward to an open process. I look forward to collaborating with each of you in this process. Over 60 members of this House are on budget review subcommittees, and we have great chairs of those budget review subcommittees leading the way. They will begin, some of them have already begun to having those discussions about the important areas of the budget in which they are charged to chair. And I look forward to working with our great Vice Chairman of the Appropriations and Revenue Committee, the gentleman from Lincoln, or LaRue, I'm sorry, not Lincoln. The gentleman from LaRue, who's doing a fine job in his role. Make no mistake about it, our constituents sent us here for a reason. That reason is to keep their best interest at heart. We will be responsible and pass a budget for all of Kentucky. Mr. Speaker, I close with an analogy, not about comic books. As many of you know, I probably have the longest drive to Frankfort of anybody in this body. The gentleman from Graves might disagree, but we're pretty close. And that drive to and from here gives me a lot of time to think. And I notice weird things. And here recently, I thought, well, this is an interesting analogy. Look how big my windshield is and how small my rearview mirror is. I've talked about the things in the rearview mirror. Those things are important. But we have a great big windshield ahead of us and a great big opportunity to do the people's work and to take care of the things, the business that we have to. We should never lose sight that this money that we appropriate up here, it's not my money. It's not the gentleman from Warren's money. It's the taxpayers' money, and they send it here and expect us to do a responsible job. They entrust us to do the people's business, and it's time to go to work to earn that trust. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, gentleman from McCracken.